Hey artist! Welcome to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this majestic elk portrait with oil paint. It's on kind of a nice blurred green background, and that green richness that you see is going to really look nice with that warmth of that fur. So I'm really excited to get going. So let's get started. If you're craving more help with painting a realistic wildlife easily, then you will love the Wildlife Painting Academy. Each month, new masterclasses are added, complete with my voice walking you through every moment, paint mixing recipes, reference photos, and so much more. You can check it out in the link in the description of this video. So like all my paintings, I transferred my sketch to my surface. Here I'm just working on a primed piece of masonite board, nice and smooth, really love this stuff. And after I transferred my sketch using transfer paper, I did a dilute acrylic wash with just a basic brown paint on top. And the reason why I like doing this is because it gives me something other than white to work on and allows me to establish both the darks and the highlights kind of right from the get-go. So here I've got my base ready, and now I'm starting off by mapping out all the darkest parts of the painting and working with the largest brush possible, just so I'm not focusing on any detail and just basically getting it done as quickly as possible. Now I'm starting to work on the background. I wanted my background here to be kind of blurred, so the focus is going to be on the elk, but I still want it to be apparent that it's a nice, rich, sort of midsummer forested background here. So I'm working with a really large brush, starting off with a nice dark green. I'm using sap green here because it's just stunning. What a beautiful color. So starting off with that dark base and then kind of patchily putting in different colors here. So adding some darks, adding some lights. And then basically what I'm going to be doing is going in with a big soft dry brush and lightly blending things out so that I get that nice blurred effect. So now that I'm pretty happy with the first layer of my background, I'm going to start to work on the elk. So again, I like to start with my darkest points first. So going in with mostly burnt umber at this point, and then blocking in those darkest parts, again using a really big brush because I don't want to focus on any details yet. I want to build a nice strong underpainting first, and then go in and start to build in some details. So I'm starting off with my darkest colors, and then I am going to start to add more white, more other lighter colors to my paint as I move along. So one of the features I really like to include in my artwork is some form of backlighting. I find that it just adds so much drama to a piece, and it's actually relatively easy to achieve. Just imagine that there was a bright light behind the subject and you're gonna get that sort of haloed glow around it. And what I love about this is, especially on animals that are, covered in fur, it makes them look a lot fluffier and it adds just a really cool element to it. So, I definitely included that in my elk. So now that I'm pretty happy with my underpainting, I'm going to start to move in with some smaller brushes here, and I'm starting to build up some more layers of detail. At this point, because I am working with oils, I'm not actually letting my paints dry quite yet. I want to have a bit of a wet base to be able to work this first layer of details in, but you're eventually going to want to let that dry and then start to build more detail on top. So I did let my painting dry for a few days, and now I'm going in with smaller brushes and actually starting to build up some really good detail and texture here. So on the antlers, building up that nice sort of dense textured look to them. They're a little bit glossy, so the way I kind of achieve this is by having a really dramatic change between the shadows and the highlights. And then I'm starting to build up all sorts of really delicious fur texture here. I love painting fur. It is just the funnest thing to paint. So you can bet I had a lot of fun here. So when I'm starting to build up fur texture, I like to start with my darkest paint first, and then I start to build up with light on top. I find that starting with a dark base makes it a lot easier for you to actually build up that texture. So I typically work in that pattern, starting with darker and then building up with lighter paint on top. So now I'm going in with a nice fine round brush here. This comes to a nice point so I can get some really sharp details. And now I'm starting to go through and adding all those little tiny details that I want in my painting. Now, I personally like to be quite strategic about where I'm placing that detail because I don't actually like to overwhelm my paintings with detail. I like there to be mostly detail in the areas that are deemed the most important. So typically when you're painting some sort of subject like an animal like this, the face and the major features like the antlers here are going to be the most detail, and I'm going to focus a little bit on the neck, and then the rest of the details are going to kind of flow away a little more easily, and this is just going to allow for a more harmonious viewing experience for the viewer. So now's the fun part. I put my painting aside for a few days so those oils can dry completely, and now I'm going in and glazing. So I'm starting off by adding a really beautiful glaze to the background here. So I'm using Liquid Original by Winsor & Newton, and for the background here, I'm glazing with sap green because it's a beautiful, vibrant, transparent, like emerald green. Looks gorgeous for foliage. And you can already see how much that really dials up that background. It makes everything look so rich and beautiful. And then I'm just kind of adjusting the background a little bit, adding some more darkness, adding some more lightness, just as I see fit. So now I'm going to start to glaze my elk. I lost a lot of color when I was building up that fur texture and detail, but that's where I can use glazes to bring it all back and make some really nice adjustments as far as contrast goes. So I'm starting off by kind of adding a glaze here, mostly using burnt umber. It's going to give some of that brown back to my painting, but it's also going to help me to adjust those shadows. And then I'm going to go in and also add a little bit more warmth and color to this fur using burnt sienna. So now into my wet glaze layer. This is where I like to work in my final details and highlights. I like to work them into that wet glaze layer because I find it makes them a little more subtle, a little more natural. And if you find that you're struggling to build up that dramatic detail, then let your painting dry and then add them on top. Alright, and that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. These elk are just so majestic, and what a pleasure to be able to paint. Now, if there's any other animal subjects that you want to see me paint, you want to learn how to paint, leave me a comment and hit that big beautiful subscribe button if you like what we're doing here. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.